Shalom, Yahweh Bahashim, Yahweh Shah, Baraka. Thumb to all the Akim out there. Oh, the bag's still here. You want some of the food? You got your sorry, so you have your Bible? You use your phone? Okay. One of the I put the fork in there, but you probably can tell. Which Yahweh Shema Alathan Bahashim Yahweh Shah, to all the Akwafian out there and to everybody. Welcome to it's been a while to the first of many after a long hiatus of the Hebrew classes from the School of Baltimore. We're gonna get started. We just had a little hiatus, but we're gonna start from the basics, start from the beginning, and we'll continue to build and become excellent teachers like the teachers in Virginia with Officer Yagadar and Officer Bataza Ah, and we'll just build every week. The first thing I'd like to go over today is really just asking the question, why the Hebrew language? I mean, obviously right now I'm speaking English, so why is it really important? Why has Commanding General Yohana put in the curriculum per se that there should be a Hebrew class taught every Friday? And hopefully we can start expanding that to where we're speaking Hebrew on a daily basis, which we should be to a degree of what we know. But it is, it's my prayer, and I know it's, and I'm not speaking for Commanding General Yohana, but I'm sure that Commanding General Yohana wants us to a point where we're speaking Hebrew fluently to each other. So the question is just why the Hebrew language? Why not, another language? Why not Arabic? Why not, another language, Russian? So why is the Hebrew language so important? So today we're just going to go into some points to talk about why we should maybe start off with the Hebrew language. We're going to go through some scriptural references. We're going to go through, we're going to go through some scriptures. And we're going to talk about it. I always like to, as you know, I'm a teacher, so I always like to go through some points. This will probably be one of the only classes where I'm sitting. I like to move when I'm teaching, especially when we're doing Hebrew, because we need to write, and, But I personally, when you're learning a language, first of all, your language connects you to your parents. Right. It connects you to your family, because you actually start hearing while you're in the womb. And they say, pretty much when a baby is born, they're listening to the voice that they heard for those 9 to 10 months. Their mother, their father, they're listening for that because they've heard the voice. And we have known that, the voice of the Most High is what is called us back to his law, statutes, and commandment. And we will see that the Most High actually spoke the Hebrew language to our forefathers. So that when we get back to it, will be the voice that we will hear. Now, so a voice, the language pretty much connects us to our family, and it also gives us an identity. You can identify, kind of like cliques. If we were in a room and there's 30 people and you hear all these different languages, you're like, well, who's speaking English in here? It's just natural. And then if you see somebody speaking English, you'll probably more likely go and talk to them like, hey, how you doing? And then you're like, oh, they can speak English. Especially if you're visiting another country and you're hearing, different languages. I don't know. I'm sure a lot of I've traveled. When you travel, you hear, the language that you're used to. It helps you to, it kind of unifies you for a moment or whenever to the other person that's speaking the language. You're like, oh, that person speaks the language. So it is important to language is very important. It's important to the Most High because he created language. It's a way that people communicate with each other, to relate to each other. So we're going to go through some scriptures to talk about why we should speak the Hebrew language and why ultimately we should get away from the English. Let's actually start there. Why not English? Well, I'd start off by saying that English is the language that was put on us when we came into captivity during the transatlantic slave trade. And, during the transatlantic slave trade, we actually, because of our disobedience, and we were put out the land, and then we were in, different parts of the world. We were taken and we lost our identity and we lost our heritage and lost our language. And when we lost our language, we lost a lot, because now we couldn't even identify who we were. And we started speaking the language of our oppressor. And our oppressor put English on us, put Spanish on others, because, the Spanish and Portuguese, Dutch. And so all these languages were put on us, and we were not allowed to speak our native languages or the languages of our forefathers. And because we were not allowed to speak those languages, we started to take on the identity of our oppressor. When you actually speak the language also kind of causes you to bring on the customs of the people around you, because all of y'all are saying the same thing. Right. So if everybody's speaking English, then I'm going to start speaking English. And then people that are speaking English are going to identify with certain things. Well, when they identify certain things, what were they identifying in our captivity? Christianity. So we start identifying with Christianity because we could understand now that language. And they're saying, well, this is the God you should worship, or this God, Allah, and this God. And so, now we're worshiping gods of wood and stone. What is that? Deuteronomy 28. And so this is why, and through our captivity, we lost the name of the Most High. We didn't know the name of our God, so we lost the name of our God. We didn't even know what certain names meant, because we were reading them in English, and we didn't know the impact of various names. And so learning the English language, all of us are speaking it because we're in our captivity, but eventually we need to get away from that and speak our language that was taught to us when the law, statutes, and commandments were given us to us. And when we were in our Jerusalem, or we were in the land of Canaan, and we were speaking that. So eventually it is my prayer, I know prayer of others, that we get back to that and become fluent in the Hebrew language, which is called the Lashon Kodash. Now, we also want to say that the Lashon Kodash is called the Holy Tongue. It is not the bastardized form of Hebrew that is the Khazar, the Jewish man speaks. This Jewish man is speaking a bastardized form of Hebrew, which is Yiddish. It's a bastardized form, and it's not the correct form that we and our forefathers spoke. They can speak whatever they want, and they can call it whatever. They can call it a banana. I could care less. But it's not it's not our language. It's not the language of our God who spoke to us. So we want to get that clear. When we're talking about Hebrew, we're talking about the Holy Tongue. We're not talking about the Jewish man's bastardized version of Hebrew. There will be some, notice we see the bastardized version. So just like the Jewish man took our culture and put it on himself and made variations and had certain beliefs, and now you can and added all these things, the dudes and the don'ts and the Talmud and all these other things. The same thing goes with Slovakia. The same thing goes with our language. He took our language and bastardized it and made variations of it, and did and it really sounds disgusting. Okay, really. So I don't know. People like Star Trek, but it sounds like Klingon. So please do not get that confused. We want to stick to the Holy Tongue that our forefathers spoke, and we're striving towards perfection. So I wanted to say we will be perfect at it. I wanted to say, so I have some points here that I'll go over tonight, and please feel free to chime in. We have Officer Alazar here holding Shamal. Let's give him a hand. And this brother came out at the last minute. I called him, and he just was ready to come out. So Tawada for that. And Tawada is a Hebrew word, which really comes from the word praise. We substitute it and say thank you. And I'll get into that too, why learning our Hebrew is important. Well, actually, let's talk about it real quick before I get into my points. The thing about learning something in its original language, so we read the Bible in English, but we know the Bible was written in Hebrew. Anybody that knows languages knows that when you are translating something, sometimes there's not an equivalent in the other language. So what you do is you find the best, word that fits, that you think will fit. Well, that's not always the best case because things are lost. So you got to think about that too when we're trying to, translate from English to Hebrew or Hebrew to English. Something is lost, and that's how people have taken the Bible and ripped it up into so many ways because they're going to translate it to what they think it is. The thing is that the prophets about the water to the Barakatha Yahweh Shai, that the spirit of the prophets are subject to the prophets, and so the teachers and the prophets nowadays understand what the scriptures say, even though there is a barrier when it comes to that language. But the one thing is that there is when people do translate, there is you have to sit up there and say, well, what word? Like I just said, the word "thawada," and we translate over the English as more like "thank you," but that's really not what the "thawada" means. "Thawada" comes from the word I think it's connected to the word "Yahweh," which means praise. So really, when you're saying that, you're saying praise when you're saying "thawada." So that might be something you want to put in your notes, "thawada," and we'll put it up on the board next week. But "thawada" is the equivalent of us saying thank you, but we're really saying praise. So let's go into some points here. We'll go over some scriptures, and we'll just get into it. It won't be a super long class tonight. We just wanted to get it started. We got to start off small, and then we'll build. And I wanted to say thawada to Officer Matazan, Officer Yagadar for encouraging me, and Officer Warium and others. It's been a long time coming. Right. So let's look at point number one that we'll go over, and I'll try to go over these points slow. Salakia, which is another Hebrew word, which means forgive me. Salak means the word forgive, and Yah means me or myself. Salakia, I will be taking my glasses on and off to read. So point number one, the Hebrew language was a language that Yahweh Shai spoke to our forefathers. Okay, that's the first point we want to point out. The Hebrew language was the language that Yahweh Shai spoke to our forefathers. Now, those that have been following UBK know that Yahweh Shai is Christ, or the English would be Jesus Christ, which, like I said, does not. We'll talk about that translation. But for the common everyday man to understand, that's talking about Jesus or Jesus Christ. But once you understand and come into the knowledge of the truth, you're coming into UBK, we call him by his proper name, which is Yahweh Shai. And we'll get into what that name means. We'll get into that as we get in. But Yahweh Shai spoke to our forefathers in that language. Let's go to Acts. Let's start off with Acts 26. Let's start off with Acts 26, 12 through 14. I'll go over. I'm going to pull it too, but Officer Alazar will be doing some reading. If you need me to read too, Officer Alazar, that's fine. If you need to take a break, I don't mind reading too. But let's go to Acts 26, and let's start off with verse 12. Now, let me give you some backstory. So Officer Alazar so this is the Apostle Paul. Most people, even if you're a Christian, a lot of people know Apostle Paul's story. He persecuted people that were following Yahweh Shai or Christ because he thought that they were, going off track from the law. And then he had a vision of Christ coming to him at midday on his road to Damascus. So we know all of that. Now, the reason why I want to point out Paul is because most historians believe that Paul grew up probably affluent. So Paul more than likely spoke more than one language. The New Testament was first of all written in Greek, but Paul, being a Roman citizen, more than likely, or at least he was more than likely exposed to languages and probably could speak at a a pretty, a fluent level in maybe a couple of languages. So it wouldn't have just been one language that Paul was accustomed to. So I'm going to point that out because there's an important reason behind that. But let's go and let's start in verse 12 where Paul is telling his story. Anytime, whenever you're ready, Officer Alexander.
This is Acts chapter 26, verse 12. Whereupon, as I went to Damascus with authority and commission from the chief priest. Verse 13.
Come.
At midday, O king, I saw in the way a light from heaven above the brightness of the sun, shining round about me and them which journeyed with me.
Okay, so he sees this great light. He's journeying with people. Obviously, it pretty much knocked him off his tracks. Like, whoa, what is this? So he's going to explain what happened. All right, anytime.
Verse 14. And when we were all fallen to the earth, I heard a voice speaking unto me.
Okay, so he hears a voice. Somebody speaking to him. All right.
And saying in the Hebrew tongue.
And saying in the what?
In the Hebrew tongue.
In the what?
In the Hebrew tongue.
So the voice is speaking to him in the Hebrew tongue. Okay. Now, this is important because if Paul knows various languages, this language is actually very important that is being spoken to Paul. And that's why he said in the Hebrew tongue. Okay, the voice was speaking to him because, like I said, Paul was used to various languages being in that, Roman citizen world. Okay, keep going.
Saul, why prosecutest thou me? It is hard for thee to kick against the pricks.
Go ahead.
Verse 15. And I said, who art thou, Lord?
So Saul was like, well, who are you? Pretty much, because he's pretty much taken back to light. The men around him couldn't really understand what was really being said. I think at one point he said they heard something, but they couldn't really make it out. He was the only one that understood. And he's saying, who are you? So the voice identifies himself. Go ahead.
Verse 15. And I said, who art thou, Lord? And he said, I am Jesus, whom thou prosecutest.
Okay, so Yahushua identified himself, and he would have said, I am Yahushua, whom thou persecutest. Okay, so Jesus was, it's a Greek, Greek. It comes from like Greek, Latin. It was various translations getting all the way down to Jesus, but from Greek to Latin to but he said, I am Jesus who you persecuted. And he was speaking to Paul and Saul, or Saul, some people identify, in the Hebrew tongue. Okay, so now he's speaking to Paul. So now Paul is like, okay, well, if he's speaking to me in the Hebrew tongue, this has to be a fellow Israelite talking to me. Okay, so now he's and obviously because he's a fellow Israelite and because he said who he is, it's emphasized in the Hebrew because now Paul can identify with him because Paul knew his heritage, and his heritage was an Israelite, and he grew up speaking the Hebrew tongue. Okay. And he spoke to him Hebrew because if your native tongue, if somebody speaks your native language, it gets your attention right away. Yeah. If you speak 5 languages, nothing is going to get your attention more than when somebody speaks your native language. You'll just be like, oh, you'll be right away because that's the language that you heard. So if you notice here, this really got Paul's attention. That's why he spoke in the Hebrew language. So it was a way to get Paul's attention because that was his native tongue, because Paul grew up speaking that, even though, like I said, he was exposed to others. Yahushua could have spoke to him in Greek. He didn't. Okay, so this really, the language, when you hear your language, the language you grew up with, it gets your attention. And now it actually brings a connection. You're like, oh, you speak English? Even when we do black talk and we talk to other black people, that it connects us. Because we'll talk amongst each other. And I can't remember that comedian. I think it was a comedian Noah said how black people can string out one sentence into 2 words. You know what I mean? Do you know what I mean? It's a whole sentence we squeeze, but it connects us, and that's how we relate. So Yahushua spoke to him, and there was a connection that Paul had with Yahushua, who at first that he was persecuting with. So Yahushua is speaking Hebrew. Okay, so we gotta, that's very important. And he's speaking to one of his people in Hebrew. Okay, so that's something that we, like I said, because I'm sure he's aware that Paul spoke many other languages, but it's important that we point that out. Now, if Yahushua was speaking Hebrew to Paul here, who's an Israelite, you can use some deductive reasoning, and we actually don't even have to use it. We want to show a scripture where he spoke to people when he was walking the earth, his people, in the Hebrew language. And I want to use these scriptures as an example because Yahushua always pointed out that the words that he heard and spoke wasn't his own words. He always made that clear. He's like, these are the words of my Father. So he's imitating the words of his Father. So if Yahushua is speaking Hebrew to his people, and he's saying, I'm not speaking the words of my own, it's very intelligent to say that the Most High's tongue that he speaks to his people. Now, we haven't heard the Most High's voice. Yahushua, he sits at the right hand, he has, speaks Hebrew. I mean, because remember, Yahushua said, I don't speak my own words. But let's look at that. Let's look at John 14, 10. Let's look at that as well. We'll get a few scriptures here to just, come. John chapter 14, verse 10. Come. This is Yahushua speaking about his, the Father who is God. Go ahead.
This is John chapter 14, verse 10. Believest thou not that I am in the Father, and the Father in me?
Okay, I'm in the Father, and the Father in me.
The words that I speak unto you, I speak not of myself.
Okay, of the words I'm not speaking these words of myself. Okay, because here's the thing: a son is going to do a good son, and we know that Yahushua was a unique son. That's the begotten son. He was a special son. So a good son or a special son will do the will of his father, especially if it's a righteous father. He's going to want to imitate that. I think, if I'm not, Jeremiah Hyman, forgive me if I'm misquoting, but I think I've heard Jeremiah Hyman say that when he came to UB he parroted Commander General Hunt. He parroted him, meaning like whatever he said, he copied it. It wasn't, so it's like you could think of the same, comparison to a degree. Like Jeremiah Hyman is saying the words that Commander General Hanna spoke. So Jeremiah Hyman's like, I'm speaking the words that were taught to me. I'm speaking the words that were given to me. So Yahushua here is saying, like, I'm not speaking of myself. I'm speaking. Let's read that again. Let's we start from the top. So I'm Baba Kusha.
It's John chapter 14, verse 10. Believest thou not that I am in the Father, and the Father in me? The word that I speak unto you, I speak not of myself, but the Father that dwelleth in me, he doeth the work.
So the Father that was working in our God, our power that was doing the works, was working through Yahushua. He was not doing these things on his own. He was doing these things that was taught to him. Let's look at this a little bit more. Let's go to John 5, verse 19. Let's look at some more of this. John chapter 5, verse 19. John chapter 5. And let's look at some more of what is said here.
This is John chapter 5, verse 19. Then answered Yahushua and said unto them, Verily, verily, I say unto you, the Son can do nothing of himself.
So he said, I am doing nothing of myself. I'm not out here trying to make a big reputation, trying to make myself the big shot, because, and that's what made Yahushua a true son of, those who are led by the Spirit, they are the sons of God, because he's led by the words, He's led by the encouragement. He's led by the strengthening of the Father. He's not doing these things of himself. He's not trying to make himself. And those were the true prophets of God. The true prophets of God did nothing of themselves. They weren't out here trying to make a big shot and lock people in and say, you got to do this and that. They were doing the words of what the Most High told them to do. They weren't trying to make a big name for themselves. So Yahweh Shah is saying the same thing. Okay, keep going.
Okay. The Son can do nothing of himself, but what he seeth the Father do.
I like that. So what he sees his Father do. Okay, and he'll also go into, we're going to read a scripture where he says what he hears the Father do. So if the Father, what was he hearing? He's hearing Hebrew. He's hearing the words that his Father is saying to speak to the people. And it's in the Hebrew tongue. Because remember, he's speaking to us in Hebrew. And he's like, I'm doing nothing myself. So that means the Father had taught him to speak these words in this way and in this language. Okay? I mean, because your child doesn't come out the womb and you're speaking to the child, and after a year or two later, I work with actually kids that are from infants to 5, and they don't speak a different language that their parents haven't taught them. They speak the language that their parents taught, and they do the things that their parents do. And some parents are shocked. I can't believe my child did that. Yeah, they're copying you because from 0 to 5, that's when your personality's really coming in, your character's really coming in. So they're going to do exactly what you do. They're going to say exactly what you say and how you say it. I've seen young students that are like 2 years old, and they're girls, but they're around their father and grandfather all the time. So they speak with a deep voice. How you doing, Mr. Ura? They just, because they're hearing their father and grandfather speak all the time. So they're imitating that deep voice. They don't know what's going on, but it's hilarious when you see a 2-year-old trying to speak like her father. She tries to deepen her voice when she greets me. How you doing, Mr. Ura? How's your day? It's 2. But she deep because she hears a deep voice all day, and she hears her grandfather and her father. She emulates that. So she's emulating the word. So Yahweh Shah is doing the same thing. I think we have a little bit more. But
For what things soever he doeth, these also doeth the Son.
So whatever the Father is saying and doing, the Son is saying and doing. That's just pretty much common sense. Okay, that's easy to understand. Okay, let's look at a few more. I mean, there's a lot here, but let's look at a few more. Let's go to John 8, verse 28. Let's just look at a few more. I just want to get the point across.
Yeah. This is John chapter 8, verse 28. Then said Yahushua unto them, when ye have lifted up the Son of Man, then shall ye know that I am he, and that I do nothing of myself.
So when he's doing nothing, that means he's not even speaking nothing of himself. That doesn't only have to do with actions. I do nothing of myself. Go ahead.
But as my Father has taught me, I speak these things.
I speak what my Father has taught me. I speak the language. I speak the words. I do the actions. All what my Father has taught me, I speak. Okay, that's pretty simple. So, the case in point, the Hebrew language is what Yahweh Shah spoke.
Right.
Okay, he spoke that language. We need to identify with that because that's something that our forefathers spoke, and that's how they can communicate with each other. Let's get one more just on this point. Let's get John 12. Get one more on this point. We might go back and visit a couple more, but let's just get one. Let's go John 12, verse 49 through 50.
This is John chapter 49. John verse 12, verse 49. It's a lie. It's a lie. For I have not spoken of myself.
I'm not speaking anything of myself. Okay, remember, think of your children. They're copying you. Go ahead.
But the Father which sent me, he gave me a commandment, what I should say.
If he's speaking to him in the Hebrew tongue, he's going to mimic that, and he's going to speak it. Go ahead.
And what I should speak.
What I should speak. I mean, that's pretty clear. So, Yahawashah. So the point number one is the Hebrew language was a language that Yahawashah spoke to our forefathers, and the words that he spoke, he got from the Father. Okay, and so obviously the Father, the Most High, spoke Hebrew, and that's how we are connected. That's how we can become connected back to our identity as far as Israelites, is speaking the language that our power speaks. Okay, because that's the language we heard on the mountain when the 10 Commandments were given, or the 10 words, the 10 sayings were given, when the law, statutes, and commandments were given down to us. That's what it was spoken. Okay, and usually, like I said, in any nation, nobody's going to speak an opposite language of the ruler. Okay, you're going to speak the same language as the ruler. Case in point, historical here. The Korean language, or the Korean written language, I think maybe it's the Korean written language, whatever, came about because the ruler of that time, they were speaking, I believe, Chinese or another language. He said, I want a language that's easy for the common man. Okay, and it was by his decree that the Hebrew, I think it was the written language, not Hebrew, the Korean written language, or he made it more simpler for the common man. But that was what the ruler said. So he made that decree, and that's how the Korean language, or the Korean written language, something like that, you can fact check me, but somehow something about the Korean language came about. It was what the ruler said. It's what he wanted. Okay, so it's obviously that our power wants us to speak the language that he spoke to Yahawashah, and Yahawashah spoke to us. So that's point number one. Let's go to point number. I do want to say this too. Also, I want to make this point is that Yahawashah. Okay, so we know that the Bible, the New Testament, was written in Greek. If you notice, if you read the New Testament, sometimes you can obviously see that it will translate certain words, because obviously when they were saying these words, it was in Hebrew. Case in point, let's look at Mark 15 verse 34. This is a case in point. We know it was written in Greek, but I think this is something we need to see really quickly to show that this was the language they were speaking. Let's look at Mark 15 verse 34.
This is Mark chapter 15 verse 34.
Oh, let me give you some back to Slakia, Officer Hauser. So we know this is Yahawashah. He's about to he's been put on the cross. He's about to die here, and we're going to see what he says. Now, this is important. Go ahead.
And at the ninth hour, Yahawashah cried with a loud voice, saying, Eli, Eli, lama sabachthani.
Okay. He's saying that. Okay. Now look what it says after that.
Which is being interpreted, my God, why hast thou forsaken me?
So that shows that, when it was written in Greek, it was saying the words in Hebrew that Yahawashah was saying, and then it said which can be interpreted as. Okay. So that's important, because it's showing once again that he was speaking in the Hebrew language as they're writing it in Greek. It's just like if I was writing something in English and then I said, he says this in Spanish, and then I said, which can be interpreted as. So the people that were reading were like, oh, well, the person then at that time must have been speaking in Spanish. Okay. So that's the author here is pointing that out, what he actually really said. And then it's like, well, which can be interpreted as. It goes back to the Greek, which can be interpreted as. So, that I want you to see that there, that it's another proof that Yahawashah was speaking Hebrew. Okay. So that's just another proof. All right. Let's go to point number two. Point number two. Oh, and Yahawashah was speaking the Hebrew language. He was actually quoting a psalm, Psalm 22. When he says, my God, why have thou forsaken me? He's quoting Psalm 22, which was written in Hebrew. Okay, so that's just another point you want to think about. He's quoting it, because when they would always, quote scriptures, they're quoting in the Hebrew language. They have to, saying, okay, so even though there was a Septuagint, the Greek form, and that's when we went into the Hellenistic era with what's that guy's name? The white the Greek guy. What is it? Alexander the Greek, right? But this shows that, you know, he obviously was speaking Hebrew. All right, let's go to point number two. Point number two, the Hebrew language identifies our heritage. Okay, and we're going to go, and I'm going to extend this point. So the Hebrew language identifies our heritage. The language can divide people. Language can divide people, or it can unite people. We've already kind of went over that, but let's look at some examples. Okay, so the Hebrew language identifies our heritage. I went over with specific examples that when you hear the language you speak, you kind of, you know, it can maybe silence you, or maybe go over to somebody like, oh, you speak that language. Let's look at an example in scripture. Let's look at Acts 21, verse 40. Acts 21, verse 40. We'll get an example here. This is again Paul. He's in one of those. Paul was always being persecuted, and Paul always had to plead his case, especially to the different Israelite groups of his time. He was always trying to plead his case because they were always persecuting him. But let's look at Acts chapter 21, verse 40. We're going to actually read it all the way through verse 22. I'll stop here and there. Chapter 22, 1 through 2. Let's start at verse 40.
Acts chapter 21, verse 40. And when he had given him license, Paul stood on the stairs and beckoned with the hand unto the people. And when there was made a great silence, he spake unto them in the Hebrew tongue. So
he, like I said, and it's interesting the author saying the Hebrew tongue because it's obvious that Paul spoke more than one language. Because if it was just one language, he wouldn't have to emphasize that. Right. You know, if they're writing about Yerah or Alazar, they're not going to emphasize and Yerah spoke in the English language. That would be a given. So it's obvious they would only say that if I can speak more than one language. If Alazar speaks 3 languages, then I would say, and Alazar spoke to the crowd in Italian, because that's going to let people know, like, oh, Alazar must speak more than one language. So it's obvious here that Paul can speak more than one language because the author's emphasizing that he spoke to the people in the Hebrew tongue. Now, he's doing this because he's trying to identify with his Israelite brother. Let's keep going.
Second, verse 22, chapter 22, verse 1. Men, brethren, and fathers, hear ye my defense, which I make now unto you. Verse 2. And when they heard that he spake into the Hebrew tongue to them, they kept the more silence. And he said,
this built a connection, like I said, because they're like, okay, let's hear what this man has to say of our heritage, our nation, because he's speaking to us in our tongue. He got their attention. Okay, now they're silent. You know, usually Paul was always getting persecuted, but they were going to give it a time to like, well, let's hear him out. He's speaking to us in our language. Okay, so that's to say, so that identifies language, heritage. So they knew it's like, okay, he is one of us. Let's hear him out. Okay, he sounds like he's speaking nonsense, but let's at least hear him out. He's speaking to us in Hebrew. Okay, so that's another thing. Let's look at another example of how language can unite people. Let me give the backstory. Remember in Acts when now the Christian church, it wasn't, the Christian church has a different thought on this, and this is what makes it look crazy. But remember in Acts when they were all speaking in tongues, and tongues means just language. It's not, Scooby Gooby Booby Scooby Snacks. That's the Christian church's take. It's not that. Okay, they were all speaking languages. But we want to, because the speaking in tongue thing, if you haven't grown up in a Christian church, the tongues thing is the craziest thing. It's really crazy. You'll hear anything in there. So, but let's go to Acts 2. And let's look at verse 6, and we're going to read verses 6 through 8. When this talks about language. Go ahead, anytime, officer.
God. Chapter 2, verse 6. Now, when this was noise abroad, the multitude came together and were confounded, because that every man heard them speak in his own language.
They were confounded. They were like, wait a minute, why am I hearing my own language? and this is the native language. Like, why am I hearing this? You know, and this gets their attention. They're marveling at this. Okay. So they're like, why am I hearing my own language? Why am I hearing the language of where I grew up with? Okay. Because language unites us. Okay. It unites people together. And what is it? Zephaniah 2:1. If we're to gather together, we need to have a common language because Israel is scattered. And because we're scattered all over the place, all of us have picked up the languages of our oppressors. Got some that are speaking Spanish, some that are speaking Portuguese, some that are speaking English, and some that are, you know, and so on and so forth. Dutch, you know, whatever, you know, and we picked up the language of our of our oppressors or the conquistadors, which has caused a division among us because there's barriers, you know. But once we come back and, you know, we got Akim that speaks Spanish, but when Akim hear us greet each other and we're all greeting each other, we'll talk about that later on. In the Hebrew tongue, we're like, oh, you know, we give a good greeting because we understand each other. So we're united. We're like, oh, you know, how about shit? We'll talk about it's all right. You know, we did the prep. But now, you know, that this brother that this I can speak Spanish, I'm speaking English, but we hear each other speaking, you know, the language, and that's a real good dap up. Okay. You know, they're like, oh, how about, you know, how about that? And then we hear the conquistadors off to the side, like, what are these brothers talking about? And that builds the division. And that causes us to gather together. Okay. So Slack, if you could continue verse 7.
Verse 7. And they were all amazed and marveled, saying one to another, behold, are not all these which speak Galatians? Verse 8. And how hear we every man in our own tongue, wherein we were born?
That's how they marvel. Like, how do we hear it in our own our native tongue? So they're perplexed. They're more curious. So then when Peter started to speak, what happened? They listened. You know what I'm saying? It's the same thing. And I, as a person in the UBK, I've listened. It's always been my personal dream to want to be fluent in Spanish. I love Spanish. And so I always try to pick it up, you know, I always try to have conversations. So I've listened to some of our Akim in the UBK teach Hebrew class in Spanish. And sometimes they're speaking, you know, 30 miles per hour. And I'm like, oh, I'll never learn that language. But what I like is when they're teaching it in Spanish, I'm like, oh, I'm trying to pick up. Then when you hear the Hebrew, I understand them. And it's like, oh man, I know what he's talking about here. He's talking about a word I know. So it's good because it makes me listen even more. Because now, even though I don't understand all the Spanish that Akim is speaking, or the Akim speaking, I understand the Hebrew he's speaking, which builds a connection. Okay, so that's the point here. And like I said, language builds a barrier from other nations. You know, when you go into the nail, our sisters go into the nail shops, and the Koreans are speaking. Is it the Koreans? Or usually it was one of the Asian groups. Okay, right. I mean, you know when they go in there. And they'll talk to our sisters in English, and then go and speak to each other in their language. Well, they're doing that on purpose because they're trying to exclude you. You know, but they want your money though. Hurry up and buy. Okay, hurry up and buy. So you know, just think about that because other cultures do that. You know, we'll go into their stores and they'll speak to you in English. You know, when they need you to buy from them, but they're right in front of you too. They'll talk to each other in their native tongue, and that's to exclude you. That's showing that you don't belong. Here's the barrier right here. You know, but you know that's why we need to get back to Hebrew so we can do the same thing. You know, as I'm talking to one of them, hurry up and buy. I'll go and talk to Alazar, and I'll talk to him in the Hebrew tongue, and we'll be laughing and joking, like let him spend all his money on our stuff. You know, and be laughing and joking. Did you get enough? And I'll add some more in there. So we can get your money. So it's the same thing. So, you know, it's a barrier built when you have your own language. It bonds the people of your culture and it leaves the outsiders out. And that's why we want to get back to the Hebrew tongue. Let's look at an example of that where, because, you know, when we're speaking different languages, it causes division. Let's look at Genesis, chapter 11, verse 6. This is an example. Genesis chapter 11, verse 6.
God, this is Genesis chapter 11, verse 6. And the Lord said, behold, the people is one, and they have all one language.
Language unites. So when Israel is gathered together and we're speaking Hebrew, it causes us to be one. No longer will we be speaking Spanish and Dutch and Portuguese and English. We're speaking the tongue that our power spoke and our king spoke. Go ahead.
Right. And this they began to do. And now nothing will be restrained from them, which they have imagined to do.
Okay, these people were united. They got one language. They were united. They had a mission, and they were all one. Okay, they were all one. They had a mission that they were going to get accomplished. And you don't only think about language here. You think about when you're one and just on the same page. So they were all on the same page here. Like we gonna get this to make this work. Go ahead.
Verse 7. Let us go down and then confound their language.
Okay, let us go confuse them. Let's cause some confusion. Okay, and that's where the word Babel means. Babel means confusion. Go ahead.
They that may not understand one another's speech.
So they won't understand each other. They're all on different pages now. Okay, they're all on different pages now. They've got different spirits, different attitudes. We're going in different directions, different languages. Go ahead.
Verse 8. So the Lord scattered them abroad from this upon the face of all the earth, and they left off to build the city.
Okay, so they went every way. Let's read verse 9 too. I'm Baba Kusha.
Yeah. Verse 9. Therefore is the name of it called Babel, because the Lord did there confound the language of all the earth, and from this did the Lord scatter them abroad upon the face of all the earth.
Okay, and if you think about it too, that's in our captivity, that's what happened. We were scattered throughout the earth, and we lost the one main language that we knew, and now we were speaking different languages, and now so that's kind of like a similar basis here. It scatters us. You don't know what is what. We're not speaking the same language. We're not on the same page. Okay, so that's another thing. That why language is important. The Hebrew language is important because it gives us our identity. We don't want the identity of the oppressor. As much as I like Spanish, I'll pick Hebrew any day over that. Okay, I'll pick Hebrew any day over English. Okay, as much as I, like I said, if I had to sacrifice one or the other, I'll pick Hebrew any day because that's going to unite me to all my brothers globally. We're all speaking and we'll all be on accord and we're all gathered together. All right. So that was point number 2. Point number 2, again, the Hebrew language identifies our heritage. It can unite people and it can cause a division, cause a barrier. Point number 3, the Hebrew language gives us a clearer understanding of names in the Bible and their missions. When we're reading the Bible in English, sometimes, especially, me growing up, you don't really, you don't really see the importance of names. Now, names in the Bible also can talk about reputation, but there's also meanings to people's names in the Bible. And a lot of times you can understand what was happening in Israel at the time by looking at the person's name, because the Most High would tell the prophet or whatever to name, name their children something, and then you can know what was actually going on in Israel. But let's just start out with our king's name. In English, it's Jesus. Jesus means absolutely nothing. The word in English itself, okay. But when you understand Hebrew, Yahweh means Savior. So you understand what Yahweh's mission was. You know what I'm saying? When you're saying Yahweh, you're saying Savior. That puts meaning to that word, and now you understand Yahweh's mission. You understand his mission, okay? But in English, you just you don't understand the meaning or the mission. It's the same thing with the word. Like, let's look at the word Samuel in the Bible. Samuel in Hebrew is let me not misquote. It's like Shamwa Allah. Might be misquoting a little bit, but what does that mean? It means the power has heard. Well, why is that important? Because the Most High heard Hannah's prayer. That's what his name means. you know, the Most High has heard, or the power has heard. You know, because remember, if you look at Samuel's story, Hannah couldn't have a child. And what did she say? She said, if I have a child, then I will give him back to you. She said she would give Samuel back. That's why Samuel, at a young age, was put with the chief priest Eli, because, you know, Hannah made that promise. Okay, so and Samuel was young. He was young, ministering unto the Most High, but the Most High heard Hannah's prayer. You know, we got a young man here in UPK. I'm gonna put him out there, young Darash. You know, Alazar's son. Let's get up. If you haven't met him or seen him, you'll be amazed. He's only 7, but you'll be like, whoa. Okay, that's a young man right there, and he's like, man, he's been here before. But when I see the young man Darash, I think of Samuel. I think of that. I'm like, I remember one time even Jeremiah Hine was him. Man, Jeremiah Hine was like, man, the Spirit of the Lord is upon him. Yeah, you just hear him speak, you're like, whoa, he's 7? Yeah, you got to, if you haven't heard him, you need to, because you're like, whoa, but you got to think of how Samuel was. So it's amazing. All right. So the point is the Hebrew language was given, it gives us a clear understanding. I think like Moses means to like to draw out or to acquire. You think of how he drove out Israel, you know, and took them into the wilderness, you know. So you got to think of the names in the Bible. They have meanings in Hebrew. In English, you're just saying that you don't know the meanings or the missions of those individuals. So that's point number 3. Point number 3, once again, the Hebrew language gives us a clear understanding of names in the Bible and their missions. We only got a couple more points. So point number 4, the Hebrew language sets us apart and helps us to gather together. And the scripture I have there is Zephaniah 2:1. Well, we don't have to go there because most of the time we quote that a lot, but it talks about gather yourselves together, O nation undesired. So, you know, if we're part of gathering together is, you know, like, you know, in order for a group to work, they have to be on the same page. They got to be speaking the same language. Okay. And so, you know, that's part of something. What is it? What's the scripture? Can 2 or 3 walk together unless they agree? I'm paraphrasing, but you know what I mean. You know, you can't have a nation and everybody going in different directions. Well, one of the ways that we can gather or unite is one language, because, like I said, that gives us the connection of our heritage and who we are, and going back to what we were supposed to do as a nation. All right, so that's point number 4, is the Hebrew language sets us apart and helps us to gather together. All right, so for tonight, we're just going to make this very easy. You know, as a teacher, I like to start off very simple. You got to start simple, and then you can expand out. So what words in Hebrew can we learn to start? So one of the things that we in Baltimore would like to approach is, before you really learn, well, when you're learning a language, and I take this from all of us growing up, we learned by hearing. That was the first way we learned English. We hear it, our mother, 9, 10 months, we come out. You know, first 3, I said first, you know, depending on the child, but we'll say, let's just be safe, first 2 to 3 years, you're not really writing much. You're just listening all the time. That's how, you know, you'll learn. I've seen 1-year-olds, you know, talk, and I'm like, I believe you're 1, you know, but I'm just talking about converse. Like, I'm like, wait a minute, you're 1. And it's just amazing, like, what a child can pick up in a year or so, and they're literally having a conversation. So one of the things that I want us in Baltimore, and of course other things that I'm going to get a lot of advice from my brothers in Virginia, because I'm really close with them, is that we want to do a lot of words. We want to do a lot of repetitive words hearing. Okay, because if you notice something, if you've been in the UPK for a while, and some people cheat at this, I got checked for this one time. You know, you've heard the greeting so much, it's nothing to you. You know, after a while, when you're practicing a language and you're speaking, even before you're writing, it's nothing to speak. So when we say the greetings, we're like, you know, it's not, we don't even have to think about it, because it's something we've heard so much, and we say it so much, and we've heard the wow and salakia. We've heard it so much, it's like second nature. I'll be just anywhere. You know, you be on the, you know, you be on the business with, you know, with white people, or with white people, like, oh, slack. They're like, how are you talking about? But it's so normal to you. But the way that we first learn a language is audio, because we're hearing it all the time. So we want to really practice before we really get into our writing system. We want to practice audio, and when we want to be more, audio, kind of talking, conversational, and we want to give it a try. And won't be, when you were younger, you're talking, nobody got upset when you got something wrong because you're just listening all the time. So we want to really try to do a lot more, audio and repetition of words. We want to make it more natural, because you'll be amazed after a year what you can say, because you'll just be like, oh man, I didn't know I got that far. But you're always hearing it. You're always hearing it, and so then you'll just be picking up, and you'll understand it, and it will just be natural to you. Now, like I said, some of us that have been UBK for a while, we think the greeting is so long, so we try to cheat. The brother will say the whole thing. Yeah, how about you now? And you be like, you'll kind of cheat a little bit. I got checked because I was doing that. One of my older altars checked me on that, so I don't cheat no more. I say it nice and clear. Yahweh Bahashem, Yahweh Shabbarakatah. I'm clear now, because I used to cheat like do the quick, but I was, but really, let's get into the habit of actually saying the words, so that the younger men, younger officers can actually hear it, and hear it and get it, and it'll be on to them so we can pass it down. So where should I start? Well, first thing I want to say is, let's go to this scripture. Let's go to 1 Corinthians 11, verse 1. Who's that? Con, you can take that. We're going to go to 1 Corinthians 11, verse 1. Can they hear the audio? Let's see, 1 Corinthians 11. I'll go ahead and I'll read it. So 1 Corinthians 11, verse 1, it says, be ye followers of me, even as I also am of Christ. Which what? Okay. Oh, no, we're fine. I read it. But you can read it again if you want to. 1 Corinthians 11, verse 1. Okay, so the reason I start here is because we're going to say, well, where do we actually start in all this?
This is 1 Corinthians chapter 11, verse 1. Be ye followers of me, even as I also am of Yahweh.
Okay, so follow me, imitate me, do what I do as I imitate Yahweh. Now remember, look at this. Look at the order here. Yahweh imitates his father. And then we have one of the apostles here imitating Yahweh. He's imitating, and then he's saying, imitate me as I imitate Yahweh. So where do we start? We got to imitate Yahweh. We got to imitate him. And one of the things is we're going to imitate the Hebrew that he spoke. So some of you are like, well, where do you start? I always say, let's start with at least a greeting, because that's, with any language, you want to, the first, break of silence is hello, hi, so we want to start with a greeting. We're not going to do the long greeting today, but we just want to start somewhere. So let's go to Luke 24, verse 36. Let's see how Yahweh did it. Let's see what Yahweh did and said, and then we'll imitate it. We won't give a long sentence or anything like that, but this is just something that you could start out with. Let's actually, let's start there. Slack.
This is Luke chapter 24, verse 36. And as they thus spake, Yahweh himself stood in the midst of them.
Let me give you the background. So Yahweh had just, they were talking about, these are some of the disciples, they're talking about Yahweh's gruesome death, and they're still pretty much shocked about it, and they're telling about it, and they're talking about it, but they found out that he had risen. So they're just having a conversation, and all of a sudden, he comes in the midst of them, and let's see how he greets them.
And saith unto them, peace be unto you.
So the first words that he's saying when he greets is peace. So we're going to start there. Okay, let's look at a couple other scriptures. Let's look at John. Let's look at John chapter 20, verse 19.
This is John chapter 20, verse 19. Then the same day at evening, being the first day of the week, when the doors were shut, where the disciples were assembled for fear of the Jews, came Yahushua and stood in the midst and said unto them, peace be unto you.
So, and once again, he's standing in the midst. He comes in the midst of them. Peace. This is be unto you. He's greeting them. Okay? He's greeting them. Let's look at one more. Let's look at verse 26. Same chapter, just verse 26.
John chapter 20, verse 26. And after 8 days again, his disciples were within, and Thomas with them. Then came Yahushua, the doors being shut, and stood in the midst, and said, peace be unto you.
Okay, so Yahushua, when he's come and greeting the disciples, like they are like his sons, he greets them saying, peace be unto you. So we're not going to do the long sentence. Let's keep it simple. So the very first word that we should do when greeting, somebody, our identity is peace. We'll say shalom. It's not shalom. It's not salam. It's shalom. Okay, it's shalom. We'll go over spelling and everything on why it's not shalom and why it's not salam later. Okay, yes, shalom. Okay, because there's so many, just shalom. Imitate what you hear that we say. Okay, we'll go into the details later of why shalom, and that's how you greet somebody. It's just starting out with a greeting, shalom. So when you see, somebody in the UPK and you're new, shalom. Okay, and that can be for our brother or sister. Now there is a way that brothers and sisters greet each other differently. But you can start out with anybody. You don't know anything else to say. When the sentence seems long, you say everybody dabbing each other up. You just look at shalom. That's a great way to start. So I saw somebody say, I can't really read it. Oh yeah. Khan.
Some people say shalom.
Oh, somebody said, oh, okay.
Shalom.
Oh, I get it. Extended. Shalom. Yeah, shalom. Let's keep it simple for the new people. All right. So that's word number one. I always say when you learn something, you learn it in threes. Scientists have said it's always good to learn something in threes. So first word for the night, shalom. That's it. Let's keep it simple. Okay. All right. So the next word that is important is you should know your creator's name. Okay. You're greeting other people, UPK, saying shalom. You should know the name of your creator. There is so much debate about this. We have so many debatable words, but like I said, we're not getting into the Yiddish and all that tonight, why things are incorrect. We're just going to start it simple. So, and let's, the Most High's name is not the Lord. We say that so we won't, we won't be saying emptiness, but we do say the Most High's name in our prayers or when we're referring to him, and you should know that, okay? And his name is Yahweh, and that's how you would say it, Yahweh, okay? And that's the Most High's name. He has a name, and he's identified himself with a name. There's scriptures to back that up. The name Yahweh is in the Bible 7,000 times. There's other groups that will say that it's this and that, but facts don't lie. The name Yahweh is literally in the Bible over 7,000 times. So if that's not the name of our God, I don't know what is. It's in there 7,000 times. You can look it up. You can ask Alexa, whatever her name is, Siri. It's over and over. That name is mentioned. Okay. There's people out there to say it's really called Ahaya, but we won't get into that. There's a reason why. When Moses said, what should I call you? It's like Ahaya, Ashar, Ahaya. He was referring himself to the first person. So we'll get into that or why he said Ahaya then. But then if you look 3 to 4 sentences later, he keeps telling Moses, Yahweh, Yahweh, Yahweh. It keeps going down. Okay. And you can find in Exodus 3, 13 through 18. We'll have to pull it. But you can look all through Exodus. Even in Exodus 34, remember he told Moses, I'll pass by you and proclaim the name of the Most High. And when he goes by, he's saying Yahweh 4 or 5 times. So it's obviously that's his name. Even look in Genesis, the beginning of the book. Okay, the book starts off, you see Yahweh in Genesis 2. So other groups out there say, well, what's really this? I mean, 7,000 to 2 times in the Bible. I don't know what to do with that. Okay, because they're like, well, it's really this, and that's said twice. And if you understand syntax and understand the language, you'll know why he said it like that. And then you have it 7,000 times. It's obvious his name is Yahweh. So I'm not going to get into that. We'll talk more about why that's debatable. But you can look at Genesis 2, verses 4 through 5, when it's saying Yahweh all through there, and it keeps going throughout the whole Bible. So the second word that you should know is Yahweh. Okay, that is the name of our God. That is the name of the God of Israel. It is Yahweh. It's not Jesus. Okay, let's make that distinction. Jesus is not God. We'll get into that later because some people think that. All right, especially if you're coming out of the Christian belief system. Okay, remember Yahweh Shai, which we'll talk about. He was praying to the Most High Yahweh, and he said, "I heard everything from my Father." That's who the Father is. That is who we serve. That is our God. That is our power. Is Yahweh. So, word number 1, Shalom. Word number 2, Yahweh, and that is the name of our God. Last word to know is, of course, you should know the King you serve. Okay, and we said it all day. It is Yahweh Shai. Okay, think of the word Yahweh and put a Shai at the end of it. Yahweh Shai. It's not Jesus. It's not Yahushua. It's not Yahashua. It's not Joshua. It's not it's so many crazy. I mean, listen, it gets really ridiculous. Okay, in English, it would be translated Joshua. Okay. That's the English variation, Joshua. It's definitely not Jesus. We just say that so the common man can understand, so people, everyday men, but the name of the King of Israel that came from the seed of David is Yahushai, which means Savior. That's what his name means. Okay, so when you start practicing that, you'll understand. And then you won't say, all the other variants or the incorrect names. You'll be saying Yahushua. When you come to class, you will hear Yahushua, because when we say our prayers, we say the Father's name, and then we say, in the name of Yahushua, the reputation. Really, when we're saying the name of Yahushua, we're really saying in the reputation of him, because really the name is talking about your reputation, how he would have done it. And he would do it just like his father would do it. All right. So, with that being said, let's just review. I always have to do a pop quiz at the end. And since Officer Alazar is here, we will ask Officer Alazar the names the words we went over. Okay, word number 1, Alazar, was what?
Shalom.
Shalom, and that is our greeting. That means peace. Okay, that means peace. So, when you greet people, just say shalom. Don't worry about the long words. And man, I don't know that sentence. Could start with shalom. Word number 2.
Yahweh.
Okay. Yahweh is the name of our God that Israel serves. Okay. Whose law, statutes, commandments we follow. It's not it's not Yahweh. It's not Yahuwah. It's not all these other names that you hear. It's so many names that you'll hear. It's Yahweh. All right, and the third name and the third word we learned today?
Yahweh Shai.
It's Yahweh Shai. It's not Yehoshua. It's not Yahushua. It's not, you'll start getting confused after a while. So that's why, and you know what? Let me sidestep too. The why you should stick to the names we said, because you'll start, you're saying all these weird names, you'll start following after strange gods. Believe me. Remember, there's a scripture in Exodus 23. Or is it Exodus 23? It's like, don't even let the names of those gods be on your lips. Okay? Don't let them be on your lips. Don't even speak them. So speak the correct names. Okay? So we have the 3. We'll end it off here. And like I said, we're going very slow. and then we're going to build. Our goal is to be more audio. We will get into the writing because I know some people are just, you got writers in here. You got, writers here like Officer Alizah who wants to write a paragraph in Hebrew. I know he does, but for the time's sake, so we can take it slow. Our first few, we're saying we're going to say a few months now. We're going to try to do more audio. We'll start off with words, then we'll get into sentences, but we want you to really hear it so that you get it. And then you'll just be saying it before you write anything. So our first goal is just to hear it all the time. What we'll also start doing is probably those that are really into it, we'll probably get pop quizzes. We'll probably do some stuff so that people could just hear the words a lot. Okay. And we might just do like short clips, just hearing, so you can just be accustomed to it. Because like I said, my students that I have 0 to 1 to 2, especially the one, they're not writing anything. They're scribble scrap. But they can have a conversation with you full-fledged. You'll be amazed. I mean, y'all have children, y'all know. And it's like, whoa, how you talking to me? You're 1 or 2. So that's what we want to get. We want to learn the language in a more natural way of just audio and being immersed in it and hearing it a number of times. That I'm going to pass the class over to officer and priest of 500, Officer Alizah. Yeah, I think I go off this way. Yeah, I think about this. I'm sorry. I think so.
Hey, Shalon, give it up. Excellent class. So, security announcement, go to ISUPK out of 1 West 125th Street, Harlem, New York, under command of General Yana. New rules for brothers and sisters. When a new brother or sister comes to the school, they are off limits for 6 months. They're here to be saluted only. They're here to share themselves with the world after 6 months. If a brother or sister has an interest in a particular person, he or she must get permission from the head to speak to a brother or sister. There's another 6 months in which the brother or sister will court each other. After this 6-month period, the brother or sister will get permission from the head to marry. Tithes, which is a commandment. You can find this in Numbers chapter 18, verse 21, and Malachi chapter 3, verses 8 through 10. Means 10th in the Hebrew is pronounced ma'ashera. 10% of every penny of any increase the Lord gives you. Give to the treasury department or teacher. Priest fund, free will offering, not mandatory, whatsoever amount you would like to give. Holy convocation, remind Akim and Agwafi on the check on social media such as ISUPK.com, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and so forth for ISUPK events and materials. The next high holy day we got coming up is Feast of First Fruits. We'll get just keep checking in for the dates. We'll give you the exact dates soon. If a brother wants to be a trooper in the school, then he has to start wearing all black, which includes black boots, shirts, pants, headband, scarf. And with that, we're gonna get one courage salute to the teacher, men of Israel, Almighty, Shabbat, Almighty, Barak, Yahweh Shem Yashah Rakatah, Yahweh Shem Yashah Rakatah, Yashimatah, class dismissed.